Welcome back to this week's intermediate to advanced level episode of the Irish Accent Podcast. I hope you're all having a great week so far. So you may have seen my episode from Monday, which was my beginner to lower intermediate level episode, in which I gave a brief overview of the Irish accent, where it comes from, some regional varieties. But in today's episode, I'm going to be delving into this topic much deeper. After all, the Irish accent is the whole reason that I started this podcast. As I lived abroad and taught English to many different students, I realised how many people are just not familiar at all with the Irish accent. Most people learn American English or British English, so in school they're purely taught and only exposed to those two accents, and even with a lot of media that people consume, so for example movies, TV shows, YouTube videos, a lot of that is also coming from America or England. So people are often quite familiar with those accents, they find them relatively easy to understand, but then when they meet an Irish person, it can be very confusing, even if they're already an advanced learner of English. But I think it's really important for people to be able to understand it, as more and more people look to live in Ireland or to study in Ireland. It's really important to become familiar and comfortable with the accent in order to settle well here, and also it will open doors in terms of being able to understand and appreciate more media or to make Irish friends. So to start us off, where does the Irish accent come from? Well, the Irish accent has its roots in the Irish language, also known as Gaeilge. For centuries, Irish was the main language spoken here in Ireland, and English only arrived later, and when people started speaking it, the sounds and rhythms of Irish, or Gaeilge, influenced how they spoke English. And that's why the Irish accent is so distinctive. You can still hear the rhythm of Irish in the way English is spoken here today. In terms of some features of the Irish accent, I'm not a linguist, so this is just a very brief overview, but I think the first thing that a lot of people say or think of when they talk about the Irish accent is the musical quality. The Irish accent tends to rise and fall, so people often describe it as very sing-songy or lyrical. Another feature might be the R sound. In Irish English, the R at the end of words is very clear. So words like car or for are pronounced with a strong R at the end, unlike in many British accents, for example. We also have very different vowel sounds. You may even have heard it in the way I pronounced car and for. It's very different to how people with other accents might pronounce those words. Another feature is the TH sound. And again, this is regional within Ireland and it will be different. But in words like think or that, the TH might change to a more hard T or D sound. Another feature which people have mentioned is we sometimes have more of a soft T sound. So for the word water, we might almost pronounce it like water, more of an SH sound in the middle of that word. And then finally, of course, the intonation and rhythm is probably the most distinctive thing. So the stress patterns can be very different, which makes sentences sound less predictable to learners who are very familiar with the stress patterns of American or British English. I think internationally, the Irish accent is generally very well liked. It's often described as being very warm or friendly and musical, although learners do definitely mention that it needs some time to adjust to the rhythm and speed of it. Now, let's look at some regional differences. It's actually very difficult to make this episode because it's so hard to describe the Irish accent in just one way. Like many countries, for example, if we even take America, you have the Southern accent, the Boston accent, California accent, and Ireland is just the same. Even though it's a tiny country, there are so many different accents within the one island. So today's episode is going to be quite a broad overview of just some of the accents. I won't actually try to do the different accents myself, but instead what I've done is I've put links to different interviews in the show notes, And these interviews are with people from different parts of Ireland. So I have an interview with people from North Dublin, South Dublin, Kerry, Cork, Northern Ireland. So if you want to actually listen to what the accent sounds like, which might be very helpful instead of listening to me just trying to describe them, I would definitely recommend after listening to this episode to check out those links and actually hear what the accent sounds like in real life. So to start off with Dublin. Now Dublin is quite unique because even just within Dublin, there are two very distinct accents. And that is North Dublin and South Dublin. They're both very distinctive, and it's very easy to tell if someone is coming from North Dublin or from South Dublin. So starting with the North Dublin accents, as the name would suggest, people who live in North Dublin have these accents, and traditionally these accents are thought to be more working class and are often flatter in tone. A common characteristic is that the TH at the beginning of words is said with a more D or harder T sound. The final T in words might often be dropped or softened a lot. It has a much faster pace and maybe less rounded vowel sounds. But to really get a sense of what the accent sounds like, I would definitely recommend watching the interview I've put into the show notes, which is an interview with two men from Northern Dublin, to really hear what it sounds like. Then we have the South Dublin accent. So South Dublin accents are characterised by a very distinctive pronunciation that's influenced by a little bit of British English and American English. And it features a distinctive high-rising terminal at the end of sentences that can often make statements sound like questions. It emerged in the 1970s and 80s among middle and upper class speakers in the South Dublin area, and the accent is linked to this specific social group who were maybe looking to distance themselves from what they perceived as the traditional or working class Dublin accent. And so this group, who were more associated with a certain affluent lifestyle, adopted pronunciations that were different from the mainstream Dublin accent at the time. Some linguists suggest that this was a very deliberate attempt to align themselves with what they viewed as more sophisticated or modern speech patterns, potentially influenced by British or American English. And I think the South Dublin accent is one accent that people can find very hard to place. If someone is hearing the accent for the first time, they might not necessarily guess that someone is from Ireland. Sometimes people might guess it's an American accent, or they're just not really sure where it comes from. So then on to the southeast, or my accent. So I come from the southeast of Ireland, and generally people say that accents from this area are gentler and easier to follow. They don't tend to rise and fall as much, and actually it's very difficult to place the southeast accent specifically. Whereas if I meet someone from North Dublin or South Dublin, I know immediately where they're from. With my accent, even if I meet people within Ireland, so other Irish people, they'll know that I'm generally from the southeast of Ireland, but they won't be able to say specifically where I'm from. You may have already heard the Cork accent. I think it's one of the most recognisable in Ireland. It's extremely musical, with lots of rising and falling tones. It almost sounds like singing at times. I love the Cork accent. I have put a link below for someone who really exemplifies a very typical or very strong Cork accent. And this is what you would hear if you travel to Cork. The actor Cillian Murphy from Peaky Blinders is also from Cork, but he has a softer version of the Cork accent. Moving on to Kerry, which is the county right beside Cork. The Kerry accent has a rhythm all of its own, so it can sound very different from standard English. And to be honest, even other Irish people sometimes joke about struggling to understand the Kerry accent. I have some family from Kerry, and my friends who are not from Kerry sometimes actually find it a little bit difficult to understand what they're saying. So it's a very, very strong accent. The link I have included to show the Kerry accent, it's a farmer from Kerry who has lost his sheep. And this video actually even went viral within Ireland because the accent was so strong and Irish people couldn't even understand the accent. And of course, that's an extreme example. Even within Kerry, there are many different accents, but in general, Cork and Kerry are both considered to be quite strong accents. The final accent which I'm going to discuss is the Northern Irish accent, and I think this is also a very distinctive accent. It's often quite sharp, fast, and it has very different vowel sounds. Some famous actors from Northern Ireland are Liam Neeson and Jamie Dornan, so I've popped also links to their interviews below. So that was quite a whistle-stop tour across just some of the Irish accents. But I presume you're listening because you like the Irish accent or are interested in it in some way. In fact, I was doing some research for this episode and I saw that in many international surveys, the Irish accent is voted one of the most attractive or most well-liked accents in English. And that is, as I said earlier, because people think it sounds very warm and friendly and approachable. Learners may find it difficult at first, but once your ear adjusts, I do think it becomes one of the most enjoyable accents to listen to. So I'd love to hear what your experience has been with the Irish accent before. Is this podcast the first time you're listening to the Irish accent, or is it an accent you're already very familiar with? I'd also love to know why you're interested in listening to the Irish accent or why you want to become more familiar with Irish English. So please do let me know in the comments. And thank you so much as always for listening. If you'd like to practice the Irish accent more, please do check out the examples I shared below. Each one gives you, as I said, a very different accent, and the more you listen, the more familiar it will become. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I'm looking forward to speaking to you again next week. Bye bye!